Welcome to Season 8 of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us. We're in Season 8 and we still have a lot to talk about. Radio Free 501c is supported by USAE News, the weekly community newspaper of Association CVBs and hotels. Learn more at usaenews.com. This week, I'm joined by first-time guest Pamela Murphy. She's the founder and CEO at Minerva Insight Strategies, and we're talking about the cost of being reactive for associations. Don't miss it. Episode 332. It's June 22nd, 2026. Hey, everybody. We are halfway through 2026 already. I hope you're having a great time here on planet Earth, wherever you are. And I want to thank you for taking some of your time this week to join us here at Radio Free 501c for this week's episode. And we are again featuring a first-time guest, which I am so pleased to be welcoming Pamela Murphy this week. Before we dive in and learn more about Pamela and our topic, I would like to remind you, if you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast service. We're on all of them, so help us out. We're celebrating our 350th episode in November this year, so would love it if we had a lot of people subscribing and following to help us with that. So make a point of doing that when you have a moment. Our topic this week is the cost to associations of being reactive. And I think this is a topic that is very timely right now. I'm looking forward to it. But before we dive into that part of the conversation, Pamela, I'm so glad you're here. We've been talking for a while, and now you're actually here. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little about yourself.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for having me. I so look forward to this conversation. Like you had said, I'm Pamela Murphy. I'm a government relations executive, and I've spent my career working across the government, the nonprofit, the association, and corporate sectors across various industries. I am the founder and CEO of Minerva Insight Strategies. We are a global government relations and business strategy firm. We're woman-owned. My partner and I have known each other for over 20 years. So we've worked together for quite some time. And one of the reasons we started Minerva Insight Strategies was because we've spent our careers building and scaling and sustaining government relations functions within organizations. So we know kind of what that takes and what that looks like. And then after we've done that work, we've spent time integrating those functions across an organization as really part of the organizational design. So we were then I played a central part of strategy and execution. And so now we teach our clients to do that, because it's important. We're not about transactional advocacy, we're about sustainable advocacy. And so we help them really tie their organizational goals to public policy strategy. And we work to kind of set up that function for them. That's part of what we do on the business strategy side. And then we leave. So we set them up for success and then we go.
And then we're out. It's up to you now. No, that's great. And that is, I think, really important, because I think a lot of organizations do need that assistance in creating that advocacy program and that plan and learning how to implement that plan, because advocacy isn't just the government relations side, it's also getting that message out to everybody and the decision makers. That's education. So it covers so many different aspects. So good for you and your partner. And as a fan of mythology, I love it. That is called Minerva.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Great. It's great. So let's dive in on this, because, Pamela, why associations become reactive instead of proactive. I think we all have our own take on that, but I want to hear yours.
Sure. So when I think of, reactiveness, obviously, a general definition, right, is about when an organization responds to events after they occur, right? So they're not anticipating them, they're not planning for them, right? And so I don't know how you feel. I would love to get your take on this too with your expertise, but I see it as a common problem really across a lot of nonprofits. I've worked at various nonprofits. I've worked at very small nonprofits with very limited resources. I've
Mhm.
worked for larger nonprofits. I've worked for associations. I've kind of worked in all those worlds, and it seems like it's kind of a common theme. And I don't think it usually has anything to do with talent. I mean, people work hard and, they're putting their best foot forward. But I think there's, the way nonprofits operated in the environment that existed decades ago is very different than it is now. Right. And I think what I've seen is that a lot of nonprofits have not made that shift to evolve with the current environment that they're operating in, right? And then you
Right.
see all kinds of issues that come out of that are just common themes. But I love, and I'm happy to go through some of those too, but I'd love to get your take on why you see that happen.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. The environment has changed dramatically. And the first problem is a lot of associations, specifically, and other types of nonprofits across the board, tend to still act like it's the early 20th century.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of like 1955 kind of decision making going on in
Mhm.
mindset. And
Mhm.
that's just strange to me because, we're in the 21st century and we're well into the 21st century. We are
Right.
26 years into the 21st century, or 25 technically, I guess. But somebody
Yeah.
said something earlier this week about wanting to find software to make a word cloud. And my reaction was like, people still do that? That's like so 2000. Why are you making a word cloud, right? It's like there's got to
Right.
be other things out there that are
Right.
easier to do. And then I
Right.
love it because people then tend to respond to you in that kindly condescending, bless your heart kind of tone, like, well, the people in the group want to know what the other people are thinking. It's like, oh, well, here's an idea. Why don't you ask them? Or
Yes.
try a chat storm if you're doing Zoom. I think that's way more fun than a word cloud.
Yes,
Uh,
I
so
agree with you on the word cloud thing. I mean, I think that's
yeah,
like a perfect example, right? Of when
yeah.
you think of how AI has become such a disruptor and
Mhm.
how we're really behind in a lot of ways in the nonprofit space on how you utilize AI, and lots of other things too. But
Yeah.
going
And then
back, yeah,
oh, I'm sorry.
no, no,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
that's just like a symptom. Okay.
Right,
But the
right,
disease is this.
right. So when I,
Nonprofit organizations, specifically associations, are reactive instead of proactive because there is a complete total breakdown in understanding of the role of the board of directors and the role of the chief staff executive and the staff. They do not understand what their actual role is, which
Mhm,
is stewardship. The IRS has never said the board manages. The IRS guidelines say the board is there for oversight.
right.
Oversight's completely different than managing. So, like, I cringe every time I see a chief staff executive job description that says reports to the board of directors, like the board of directors is their boss.
Hmm.
It's not the same relationship. And I think that's really where this reactive breakdown comes down because we also talk a lot. Another symptom is the length of time it takes to make a decision or make a
Hmm.
change. And that is
Yes.
because of that disease of the breakdown of understanding of roles. And that's where I've come to after all these many decades of association and nonprofit management. So that's my take on it, Pamela.
You know what? There's so many things I agree with. And I'm so glad you brought up the idea of the, executive, CEO, president, whatever the title is,
Mhm.
and the reporting to the board, because I do think that that starts. I mean, when I think of, reactiveness, I think it ultimately lands with leadership. Right, with your leadership. That's really where the issue, because he or she, when you think about it, they determine organizational structure, they determine visibility, they determine processes for decision making, right? And so, when I think of leaders that, when I kind of put together my list of leaders that I believe are proactive and really run a high performing organization, the first thing I look at is, one of your top jobs is to hire well. right? You need to
Mhm.
hire well, you need to hire talent and expertise that is needed. And that doesn't just mean, I think a lot of times association goes, they go for topical expertise. And I think that needs to be wholly expanded to, hiring someone who knows how to manage, who knows how to
Mhm.
hire well, because it starts to kind of, that's how it starts to that's the downstream, right? How does a leader cultivate talent? How does a leader address conflict resolution? That has to be done. I see a lot of that not happening in nonprofit space where I've had experience. How do you create a culture and processes for decision making?
Mhm.
And then I always think, we talk a lot about culture within organizations, but I always feel like culture and systems go hand in hand.
Yes.
Right. And so,
Mhm.
just being, when we train managers, and a lot of times managers don't even get trained. That's a whole nother topic that,
Yeah.
that we can discuss. But part of the training, and part of the experience when you're hiring a president or CEO when they come in, or an executive director, is that they need to understand that culture and systems go hand in hand, and they need to understand how to create operating models that support all the things that we just talked about. Because if there isn't that, then right away you're not going to have the clarity that you need from the leader to communicate their vision, to communicate the strategy that needs to take place, to bring everyone together so they're on kind of one page and moving forward to support that mission and execute the strategy. So I always see it as, it really starts at that top, and kind of who is brought in, and where's the kind of, leaders need to be accountable and to ourselves, right? And then the downstream happens. But when there's that breakdown there, and like you said, that lack of clarity about what's the board's responsibility versus what's the CEO's responsibility,
That's right.
then it starts all there. And then
Yeah.
all these other things that we're going to talk about, they just kind of flow from that, is what I've seen.
Yeah. And, I think that's a great observation about the downstream because it does all start at the top. We all know
Yeah.
that. And I think the most important thing is to put together a strong C-suite team
Yes.
because then you have a group of leaders. And that's the key word there, the difference. You need leaders, not managers,
Yes.
because it's two very different mindsets and ways of doing things. And boards need to let the C-suite team, whether it's one person or five people, let that C-suite team do the work that you hired them to do, which is to lead your organization. It's up to the board to set the direction and the vision and the mission, and here's our goals. This is what we want to accomplish. And then you hand that over to your C-suite team who's going to lead the rest of the team members. I'm with you on that 100%. But
Yeah.
I think this is why we're reactive because I'm going to make a opinion statement here. This is why too many chief staff executives end up not feeling successful
Mhm.
or end up getting forced out because
Mhm.
you spend so much time trying to balance that vague vision of what that working relationship actually is
Mhm.
and not recognizing that no, you cannot do this job at the association simply because you work in the profession or industry. It is not the same work. And
Yeah.
that's another hurdle that I think we all have to. I worked at an association for nursing home administrators, and they think the whole world runs like a nursing home. And they stared at me like I was nuts when I told them, well, but this is an association, it's not a nursing home. It's a
Mhm.
different kind of business structure. So it's very difficult to get that across to people, especially
Mhm.
when you have a hands-on, very involved leadership. And that has pluses and minuses, like a lot of other things. But there's so many
Mhm.
other points we need to get to.
Mhm.
So we've laid the foundation here. We've
Yes.
we've outlined what the issue is. It's like, why are we reactive and not proactive? What's getting in our own way
Yes.
about that? So, but you help people recognize what that hidden cost of reactiveness is. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, there is this huge hidden cost that we all know exists, right? So it's whether you're looking at operational costs, strategic costs, human costs, orgs costs. I mean, the list goes on, right? And so, and we've all heard of the reactivity tax, right? I mean, there's all these studies, as you know more than anyone, Cecilia, that are out there. I mean, I saw one study that talked about, reactive operations typically cost 15 to 25% more than proactive organizations. I mean, there's studies out there that show this, or when you're looking at, I mean, there's all these studies about employee retention and how much it costs when you lose great talent, right? And so there's all these financial costs. I mean, one of the things I'll give an example for, because I see it everywhere. I've worked in every sector. So and I've seen it in every sector. It doesn't matter if I'm at an association or I'm at a big corporation. I've seen it. One of the areas is around budgeting. And, I see this it's just an example I can give around kind of these operational costs where, everyone moans when it's budget season. And then they say, okay, CFO's coming in, we're going to do budget talk and we're going to, put together our budgets and we're going to, have these separate meetings. And sometimes they pull together everybody, but it's not every meeting, it's just one meeting. And so what I always didn't understand. And every time I went into those budget meetings, I would say to them, why are we not doing this year round? Why isn't budget season year round, whole fiscal year? Why are we not meeting? Why is this not fully integrated into what we do? Why are we just kind of gathering when, oh, we got to get this together and we have to get it in front of the board? Right. And so, I always found because then what you find is, and this is just one example, you would find all kinds of areas where there were duplicated efforts. We're wasting money. There's three different functions doing the same thing, right? Or, there's this constant reprioritization, but then no one's meeting, so no one knows that what's kind of going on and what people's priorities are. And then maybe my priority might not be as important right now in this fiscal year as my peer's priority. So how do we kind of talk through that and figure that out? Or, where's there's a resource drain? Where are we talking about that, having an honest conversation about that? And this is just like one example where, there's all these hidden costs because it all goes down for me
Mhm.
to we are not integrated. Because when an integration should be everywhere, your function should be integrated, your cross-functional work should be integrated, your budget process should be integrated, your board priorities and what's going on there, that should be
Exactly.
downstream and integrated, right? All of it. And so you're going to see all these things come from that, right? Like same thing would go with like if you look at strategic costs, you're going to see things when you're going to have missed opportunities if you're not all coordinated and integrated, right?
Mhm.
You're not gonna have an inability to address disruption. And that's disruption is kind of 24/7, right? And
Mhm.
so all of these things, and then, I could go into, we probably could talk for days about the human cost. And again, this all just kind of the root of it is that you're not functioning as an integrated, cohesive, organizational organism. And so what happens then is then you start to see really the downstream. Like when I gave the example about the budget, then people start to get frustrated and they start to get, and then people don't want to collaborate as much. And maybe the trust starts to go. And there's all these things that happen. And then the cost is the human cost, the toll on people, the burnout. I call it burnt through because most people say I'm burnt. No, you're kind of toast. We're all kind of burnt through at this point, right?
Right.
And so there's all
Right.
this human cost. There's a moral decline. There's frustration because there's a lack of clarity and cohesion and integration. And so it's one of these things that I have seen it for my entire career. And it becomes very frustrating because I usually am in those rooms going, why are we doing it this way? Why? And you get the thing of, well, we kind of always did it this way, or it's just easier this way, or what we're too busy to put a plan in place or whatever. And so, then I call it, you just get on the hamster wheel and you keep going,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know?
What you just said, we're too busy to make a plan. or we're too busy to train, or we're too
Mm-hmm.
busy. Years ago, and I use this example a lot, years ago, I think it was like almost 10 years ago now, I put something out on Facebook about, what, I think the IRS should require 1 hour of training every month for members of boards of directors, just 1 hour a
Mm.
month, whatever that is. Because, we have to check off that we have a whistleblower policy and a document retention policy.
Right.
I could not believe the amount of pushback I got from people. Mostly it was either people who thought, well, my board's so good they don't need training. No, your board too. But also people saying, we don't have time for that.
Yeah,
Yet, we always seem to have time to clean up the messes that get made because our
correct.
boards are not clear on their direction and what they're supposed to be doing, or we're not in a culture and an organization that is set up to say to somebody who's kind of stepping out of line, hey, just because you're a member doesn't mean you get to behave badly.
Interesting what you're saying about, I mean, first of all, I think the idea of the IRS training is fantastic.
Yeah,
And the people that what I have found, and I'd so be interested to hear what you have found in your experience, the people that some of the hidden cost around employee retention is the people that recognize the importance of those structures and those processes and the integration of these functions and how it makes an organization more efficient and more effective, those people will sit there and tell you, absolutely, we should do an IRS training.
yeah,
I mean, those are the first people that will stand up and say, this is fantastic. This is great. This is exactly what we need because they recognize it.
right,
It's when those people, it's when kind of like the larger kind of association, because associations can be very big, that they're very complex. They have a lot of stakeholders, right?
right,
Both internal and external stakeholders. It's a lot to manage. It's kind of when that starts to swallow up those people's ideas, and then those people become very isolated and become, kind of set aside over here. You start to lose those great people, those
yeah,
people that can really help support the executives be a better executive, help the board be a better board, right? Help their peers and help teams. I mean, they want to collaborate. They want to kind of move the needle, and make an organization better. And those are the people. Those are the first people that start to see kind of that moral decline, and they don't feel like there's a place there because you're constantly climbing up a hill with boulders being thrown your way.
right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it
that's how
is.
I think of it.
Well, I think, you know, playing off mythology, you made me think of the story of Sisyphus and how
Yes.
he was condemned in the afterlife to push a rock up a hill and then the rock would just fall back to the bottom. He had to do it again. I think that's a good analogy too often for nonprofit
Mhm.
management because it seems like we're always doing things over again. Like
Yes.
the other day, I was in a conversation with some people and somebody asked if there were any board policies available about social media use.
Mm.
And I was like, "What?" And people started talking about it and I said, I would just think 25 years after social media became a thing, we would have this taken care of by now. But
Yes.
we tend to like start over all the time. It's always tabula rasa. So as a profession, the professionals of nonprofit management, I think we have kind of let all that get away from us
Mm.
in service of pleasing the board instead of making sure the board is successful. Those are two different things. I think we know
Yes.
that. Your points earlier about making sure that your systems are integrated and we don't have silos, we have cross functional teams, we have cross functional planning. Everybody knows what's going on to the point where they can be successful in implementing their work and how it relates to other people.
Hmm.
I often find that too with staffs, no matter how big the organization is, they don't always know what the other guy does.
Hmm.
They don't know
Yes.
what they do. They don't understand it and how their work integrates into it. And that's why I like to suggest to nonprofit organizations that the entire staff participate in some training on the actual strategic plan. not the task and the tactics they're going to implement, but understanding the plan and how their work supports that plan. And I think that really makes a difference because obviously the board makes the strategic plan, but the staff creates the implementation plan or the business plan, whatever you like to call it, at your organization. But the staff comes up with the plan to make it happen. They
Mhm.
decide what they want to happen. The staff comes up with the plan to make it happen, reports back milestones, metrics,
Mhm.
deadlines, and how things are happening, or if they're not happening, got to
Mhm.
point that out too. It's not
Mhm.
happening. So,
Mhm.
but I'd like to get your thoughts. We want to be proactive, not reactive. So I'd like to get your thoughts on the concept of adaptive leadership, which has been around for a while
Mhm.
and can be summarized as purposeful evolution in real time.
Mhm.
I think it's really more relevant than ever right now in the 21st century because this is an era of human history where things are changing so rapidly because
Mhm.
things are falling away. I kind of relate it to the fall of the Roman Empire. The thing that held the world together disappeared.
Mhm.
And at first
Mhm.
it was going away a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And then all of a sudden, bam, the rest of it fell over. And people kind of wandered around going, what do we do now?
Mhm.
So it's because the world fell away. And that's
Mhm.
what's happening to us now. The way the world was is disappearing. And yet, as humans, we're grabbing onto that floating piece of wood after the shipwreck, hoping
Mhm.
somebody comes by and picks us up. So I
Mhm.
think we tend culturally to hang on to that flotsam of when something falls apart because it's no longer viable. So, how do we do that? How do we adopt adaptive leadership so we are proactive instead of reactive?
Yes. Well, first of all, it's such an important question because I think, one of the things when you hire an executive, I think one of the things that needs to be part of that whole assessment process is how you prepare and address change. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't know how to do that. And they're in leadership positions, or maybe not even don't know how to do it, but aren't comfortable with it. I mean, it's a normal kind of thing, right? To not be comfortable. Most people don't want things to change. What if it's hard and change is hard and you have to do different things and you have to learn different things and you have to get outside your box and it can be you know scary. I mean, that's why when you talk about change management, I mean, a lot of people don't, it's a lot. It can be overwhelming, and you also don't know what's going on in people's personal lives, and they might have a lot of change going on there. And so it's just, I just think it's something that I have not seen through my experience as part of leadership assessments. And I think it should be because the thing is, it's always going to change. It's always evolving. It's always changing. I remember a smart person said to me decades ago, the only thing you can count on is change. And I
Yes.
remember thinking to myself, yes, she's correct. Like, yes, I know there's other things you can count on, but the reality is the point of that was no matter how you fight it, it's coming, right? So
Mhm.
then how are you prepared to deal with that? How do you think about change? Right? And so I think it kind of starts with leadership and how we do that. And then I think the whole kind of integration piece, um, that's a big change, right? Most organizations, as you know, Cecilia, do not function that way. Most organizations are very siloed, right? You've got, you operate in silos. We've normalized firefighting to the point where it's like, more important than strategy. All we're doing is putting out fires and dealing with crises. You know, um, Strategic decisions are being made without full visibility because if you don't have that full integration, then you're like you said about the board not being informed. Like part of a C-suite's job is to constantly inform um, they're leaders, right? The CEO, and then the CEO's job is to inform the board and to prepare them for changes and disruptions and to have a plan in place and all of those things, right? So I think it kind of has to be both. I mean, I think when I think of like high performing orgs that do this well, and there's not many that I have seen, to be honest with you, but the ones that I've seen that do it well are ones that, create an enterprise strategic review process, right? Where you are taking all of these functions and you are looking at this as a full organizational enterprise. It's not just, okay, communications is over here doing this thing, and then membership's over here, and we got events over here, and we got government relations over here, and operations over here, right? Um, Things like integrating intelligence across departments, right? Making sure that that is consistent flow of intelligence and transparent communications. Things like, aligning strategic priorities. I think to your point, what you said before about, I can't tell you how many times an organization creates a strategic plan for 3 to 5 years, and most people at the organization don't even know what the strategic plan is.
Right.
And then how are they going to execute it when they don't even know what it is, right? And so there's this huge gap. And then you've got leadership teams that have, to your point, you made this earlier, it was a really good point, that have no clue how their work fits into the larger strategic plan. So it's just like a complete lack of execution of the strategic plan, which is really the leader's job. And then
Mhm.
it's a C-suite's job to do that with their team, right? And then you need to have this consistent communication around that. So it's like
Yeah.
so many things I think that can be put in place that I have seen that have been successful. But I think this kind of idea of addressing and preparing for change and evolving with it, and then this idea of integration, um, just they go hand in hand,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think no, that's a great explanation, I think. And we definitely need to make sure everybody knows what's going on. I mean, what is wrong with that? You're not sure there's confidential things and those need to be kept confidential and private, but the fact that one department is working on something that affects another department, that should just be out there in some way. We have all this technology now that we underutilize for communication and information sharing, I think. And we need to do that. And another trend I've seen that I've really identified, especially I'm going to say about the last 18 months, and maybe I just never noticed it before because, like you, I'm in the middle of it. You don't see it when you're up close.
Mhm.
This always focusing on the exception to the rule instead of the actual rule. You're the exception because you're not norm. I'm not going to say not normal. That okay. I do deserve angry postcards for that slip. Sorry. No, I don't mean not normal, but you're not the norm. You are not what is usually going on. And people tend to do that because we're humans, we're solipsistic. So we think the universe is our universe, and
Right.
no, it's not. There are certain things that are common across groups and communities, but your exception to the rule, always arguing the exception, the hair splitting, that doesn't make you sound smart. It makes you look like you're trying to sound smart
Mm.
because I think a truly intelligent person is the person who does what you have outlined. They see how every part of the organization integrates, relates to each other. Other organizations may be similar to yours. Your exception at your organization is just that, an exception. It is
Mm-hmm.
not what's kind of going on everywhere, because you know what? The sky is blue everywhere. The exception to that is, well, it's a cloudy day. The
Mm-hmm.
sky's still blue behind the clouds. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a lot of that kind of thinking. And I
Yeah.
think one of the reasons we have that is because people feel very unsettled.
Mm.
They feel very unsure. and uncertain right now for a lot of reasons. Some people like to point to the current administration in Washington, D.C., but it's more than that. Things were uncertain in the previous administration. Just some people felt more comfortable in that administration.
Mm.
I am a person, and I'll be upfront about this. This might be a personal failing or a flaw, whatever you want to call it. I am very comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm.
So sometimes it takes me longer to understand why people don't like something or they're afraid of it or they're uncertain about it, like imposter syndrome. I know what it is. I've read a book about it. People talk about it. I'm just like, it's not relatable to me. So it's like I work at it. I work at understanding the people who aren't comfortable being uncomfortable. But I
Mm.
think bringing it back to our original starting point of reactive instead of proactive, I think sometimes humans, and again, this is an opinion, I think humans like to be reactive because it's more comfortable.
Mm.
It feels safer to react instead of go out and try something because we're all risk averse.
Mhm.
We don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to look bad. We think everything is going to blow up if we do one thing that doesn't work. And
Mhm.
that's not true because you don't know if it's going to work unless you try it. But if you say, but it might not work, so I'm not going to try it, then you're never going to know if it works because you're never going to try it, right? So you end up
Mhm.
in this cyclical thinking.
Mhm.
So, in your opinion, Pamela, you've worked with a lot of groups, you've helped them look at their system, you've helped them integrate it, come up with their plans, implement them, and then you're like, you're good to go. My work here is done.
Mhm.
So, what do you see that's different about a proactive association?
Yeah. I think proactive associations have proactive leaders who listen
Mm-hmm.
instead of talk. I think they have leaders who are self aware. I think they have leaders who know, like what we talked about, they know how to um, be uncomfortable, right? I mean, I always say that I've always, I, I tell people and teams that I've had over the years, it's not, life is not black and white. You have to be comfortable living in the gray, right? And I think really, truly exceptional leaders live in the gray. They know how to live in that space, but yet get things done and make decisions and delegate and execute. They are great diplomats. They know how to your point, look at the whole organism, see all the functioning parts, everywhere from the board. If you're in a corporation, you have investors, you have all kinds of other shareholders, you know, um, the entire kind of organism, and be able to see how everything impacts everything within that organization. And so it starts with leadership. And I keep going back to that, but it starts with leadership who's accountable too, leaders who aren't afraid to fail, leaders who put themselves out there, and you try something, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and then you figure it out and you move on. Maybe you have a better plan. So when you try this again, it doesn't happen the way, it happened last time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of where it starts, is truly with leadership. And it's always interesting to me because leaders who have clarity, leaders who are able to communicate and communicate often. And that doesn't mean micromanage. That doesn't mean be in the weeds, but is be able to stay at that leadership level and communicate, and to build layers of trust with their C-suite, and then their C-suite then builds layers of trust with their team. It's a whole downstream where everybody knows for the most part that they are a valued member. Those are the kind of leaders that stand out to me. Those are the people that, I mean, for instance, I've watched a leader, a CEO, um, do a huge meeting and across an organization. And there had to be a very difficult decision made, and the membership did not want this membership or this decision to be made, and the staff was really turned off by this and didn't want this to happen, and there was a lot of uncertainty. And I watched this person go in this room with the confidence, with the clarity, with the communication skills, and able to really grow this trust to bring this whole body of people with her. Um, and I've watched other people come in without all of those skill sets, and they don't bring the people with them.
Right.
And so I think it really kind of that's where I look at it, is these high performing teams, and we're able to come in and we're able to point out gaps. Right? Here are some gaps that we're seeing. We do an assessment with our clients. Here's some gaps we're seeing. Here's where we think you could be helpful. Here's where we're thinking you could set the agenda. We do all those type of things. And the other thing I will say, Cecilia, that I love that you said in the very beginning, and I have barely ever heard anybody say this before, except government relations folks, is that everybody's an advocate at these organizations. I always say that to people. And
Mm.
half the time when I'm saying that to like the membership team, or I'm saying it to the ops team, or I'm saying it to legal or whatever, they look at me like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't do advocacy. And I think it's a leader's job to come in. When you are a mission driven organization, you are advocating. Every single leader and every single team member has a role to advocate, but we don't talk about it that way. It's never usually talked about that way. It's like they think, oh, advocacy is government relations, or advocacy is maybe what somebody does over here. It's this kind of siloed thought process around advocacy, and that's not what mission-driven organizations are. They are advocacy organizations. They are moving us towards their mission. And so it's always, I love that you said that, because that's something that I always, talk about when I'm talking to other teams. I call them advocates.
Well, and I think that is a great thing to call people because you are advocating for the whole organization. So if you're on a team, let's say you're on a football team, you may
Right.
not be the quarterback, but you're there to help make a goal. So
Right.
you might be the tight end or the guy who kicks the field goal, but you're all on the same team trying to accomplish the same goal. And that's another thing you've mentioned silo several times. That's my
Yeah.
least favorite thing about organizations.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, I don't do that. I do this. The most successful associations, and I say associations specifically because they're
Hmm.
membership driven,
Hmm.
they want people to join and engage. They're the ones who say member service is everybody's job.
Yes.
So you help that member. It might be a membership question or maybe a government relations question, but you help
Mhm.
that member get to the right person. You help that member find the information on the website, or you just email it to them if you have it.
Mhm.
Everybody commits to that. So
Mhm.
I think that really helps break down the silos, but we also
Mhm.
have to take the time to get people to
Yes.
do stuff together, come together and brainstorm, come together on a team, cross-functional team in the organization. That's how we learn about each other and we learn how what we do supports each other.
Exactly. And I feel like that is why the organizational design and the implementation of that design is so important. Integration, cohesion, all of those things that I've talked about. Because, so for instance, an example might have been that I would always do when I came in as running government relations, didn't matter where I was. Um, I would come in and I would say to myself, okay, we're going to go on the bus tour. And the bus tour was, the team gets together. Maybe we put together, a PowerPoint. Maybe we just talk and think about the things that we want to talk about with other teams. And we meet with everybody. So we're talking with the executive, usually would report into the president and CEO. We'd be talking to, board members, in an appropriate venue. We would be talking to all of the leaders and their teams, and we would not go in and talk. We would go in and listen. What are your pain points? What are your challenges? What are the internal politics you're dealing with?
Mhm.
Maybe they're feeling a ton of pressure, right? And government relations people are really good at that because we politics is in us. So we understand, right? When other people, all the internal politics, we're the first to see those things going on, right? And to recognize it and understand it. So first is to go in and really listen, and then is to go in and have a conversation about how we can support those teams and those leaders, how
Mhm.
they can work with us. And then the goal is not to leave the bus sitting on the side of the road and never coming back. The goal then is to constantly do that throughout the year. Because to your point, you can't just kind of roll in once and do, have a cross-functional project and then you never see those people again after the project's done for the remainder of the year. The only way to integrate and to build trust and to work together is really that basic relationship of listening and understanding and having each other's backs. And as a leader, that is a leader's responsibility to go in and set that tone and set that direction, right? So that's the first thing I would do for my staff was the bus tour. And then there's a tons of other ways that we integrate, but that's, we tend to do it when there's a crisis, or we tend to do it when, somebody is saying, oh, you got to go work on this project with someone, or then or we just don't do it and we don't know what's going on. And to your point, using membership, it, um, when you think of when we always thought of membership, it was always like, how do we bring value to our members? And
Mhm.
every single function in an association brings value to our members, but we don't always communicate it in a
Well,
coherent
we,
manner.
yeah, I'm sorry, but
Yeah,
this conversation, we have gone deep and
we have.
we have gone long and we could go even
We
longer.
could. There could
But
be
then,
part two.
yeah, I was going to say, but then what will we talk about next time you come back? Which I hope you
Correct.
will come back.
I'd love
That would
to.
be great. So, as you know, Pamela, I like to ask my guest, what is the one thought you'd like the audience to take away today? And how can they get in touch with you if they want to learn more about how you can help build a team of advocates?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's kind of short and simple for me. We talked a lot about this. Change will come. And don't fight it. Evolve with it. Right? And that's transferable to anywhere and to anyone. That's what I would leave with your audience. And then you can reach me. I'm on LinkedIn. Minerva Insight Strategies is on Instagram. We have a website. You can kind of find us anywhere.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you. And I do hope the audience will come find you for their advocacy needs. So thanks for joining me this week.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was a great, great conversation.
It was. Thank you. And I will follow up with you on returning so we can have part two of this long conversation. But we have to go rogue for now.
Yeah.
But we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So, again, quick reminder, follow or subscribe on your favorite service. You don't want to miss any of these conversations. They are more important than ever as we are in an evolving environment and an evolving profession serving the nonprofit organizations in our community. So, stay tuned for more conversations like this. But in the meantime, check out our website, roguetulips.com. I just realized, Pamela, I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of this episode, so I
I
hope
didn't
people
realize
know
that
who I am.
either.
I just thought about that. So, a quick intro of me. Hi, I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp from Rogue Tulips Consulting. And my company and our podcast partner, USAE News, support the podcast this year. So thank you, USAE News. Check out their website and get yourself a subscription because they are what I call the paper of record for the association management community. And then check out the Rogue Tulips website, again, roguetulips.com. Check out our services page. See if there's something there that we can work on together. If you don't see your project there, give me a call and we'll talk about it. Check out this episode on our podcast page. You can share this insightful conversation with Pamela with your friends and colleagues from there. And you can also find our podcast library. We have a lot of great episodes. We're well past 300 episodes. So make sure you check those out. Check out my blog to find out what's on my mind every week. like I always say, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. So, you might find something surprising and insightful for yourself. And in closing, check out our education page. We're offering ethics courses through the summer, and we'll be launching our CAE courses in the fall. So watch for updates on when registration opens. And also, if you are going to the ASAE annual meeting, I will be speaking on Tuesday morning on ethics. So check out the ASAE schedule. I'll also be in the exhibit hall at booth 1329 with the Nonprofit Consultants Collaborative. So come visit us in the exhibit hall. That's it for this week. On behalf of Pamela and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together.